What's your whole take on the importance of the Bitcoin halvings? And let me tell you what's kind of preambling my question, because I had I don't know, say debate, a discussion with Buck from Fiat the other day on a Twitter space, where I was arguing how the Bitcoin halvings are still very relevant to consider. He was arguing that the Bitcoin halving is pretty irrelevant because what truly matters from his point of view is at the end of the day what affects the macro economy, which is more or less just interest rates. He said that that's kind of the major macro mover and how that's the most important thing to consider. Where my point of view is 100% yes, that's correct, absolutely, but you still need to consider niche sector relevant things. So just how like in the stock market, if you increase your dividend or if you announce higher than expected earnings, how that affects the stock. At the same time, so does the interest rate. So like my perspective is that it's both. You got to consider both. He thinks the Bitcoin halving is rather irrelevant. What's your whole view on the importance of considering the Bitcoin halving moving forward, like incorporating that understanding with your hex stake ladder, with your accumulation strategy? Like, how do you? What's your take on all that?
Well, he's saying the Bitcoin halving's less
pretty irrelevant. But it's like priced in because like everybody knows about it. It's priced in plus interest rates.
But interest rates throughout the duration of Bitcoin were at like 0, so it doesn't matter if they're static. Then it doesn't matter. You have to look at other things. I mean, if they're changing, yes, if interest rates stay high, yes, it matters. But if they stay low, then you have to look at other things. So, I mean,
yeah. And from his perspective, because I'm trying to not misquote him, is that, the bear market kind of more or less coincided with the rate hikes in the interest rates.
Yeah, I think that Bitcoin can only do well in easy money. I mean, in the long run, and there is easy money, and I think there will. I mean, there isn't now, but inflation is at 3% now, and then it's going to be at 2%. And once it's at 2%, it's an inevitable lowering of them. They just can't keep them this high. We're not 1980 anymore. It's the overall point. So, I mean, and then once that happens, interest rates are irrelevant. Like interest rates are irrelevant once they're just 0 the entire time. So, yeah. So I mean, yeah, he's right. If interest rates is like something that's like going up and down, like it's not like they're pretty much 0 always lately. I mean, since 2008. So, and they're only high now because of inflation. So, the overall point is that the Bitcoin halving matters now. I mean, it bottomed on time. It topped on time. It's not a guarantee that it's going to continue to play out. I think I'd argue it's less likely that it will continue to play out. But you have to, even if you're saying that it's going to break, that is taking into account the halving. If the cycles, if you're saying that the cycle is going to break and it's going to be front run, or it's going to be lengthened, then you're taking into account the cycles, right? So, I mean, if you're saying that the cycles are going to shorten, you're thinking of cycles. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, is it going to continue to play? I think as Bitcoin matures, and I think it's going to get flipped by Ethereum, and it's going to be less significant piece of the market. So, as it becomes less significant, and as it becomes more heavy, I think it'll take less and less of a it'll take more of a backseat. Yeah. I think it's
so that's a good point, which is, again, there's a good reason to think that Ethereum might flip it with this XRP news, interest rates. I completely agree. I think more and more so moving forward as time moves on, as things develop, these more outside factors, sector independent factors like ETH introducing sharding or whatever, scaling, like those things will be more and more influential moving forward. My whole thing is just like, I don't think it makes sense to right now to completely and utterly throw away what has historically been, seemingly according to a chart, the most influential bullish catalyst we've had kind of historically. And I bring this up because I have trouble completely because people bring up all these great points of how like it's the macro that really affects things, and while that is a fantastic point, I've trouble like throwing away the significance of Bitcoin's having, just because if you act based off it, it's an incredibly useful thing to do, and if you behaved, yeah, go ahead.
It just doesn't make any sense that he's saying it's irrelevant. It literally topped and bottomed exactly on time. Like, how could you say that it's irrelevant? It's definitely relevant.
If you
want to say it's not going to be relevant, fine. It's if you're not going to take, if you don't take any profits, within that time frame because the interest rates don't get raised, you're a fucking idiot. That's it. No disrespect.
No, and that's my thing. It's just like if you look at a chart.
This is the guy that said Pulse is doing a 40x,
50x, 40-50x.
This guy doesn't know what he's talking about, dude.
Bro, I would love to. I don't know. I don't know. I think it would be interesting for you two to have a conversation. But again, there's no fucking, But I do genuinely love. Like I was a debate kid, man. I love exploring differences of opinion. I love talking to people who disagree with me.
I mean, it's economics. When you have a supermarket, right, and there's 100 customers a week on average, each buying one bottle of milk, so there's a shipment of 100 bottles of milk a week to satisfy the 100 customers, right? That gives it a price. If 1 week it's 50 bottles of milk get delivered to the same 100 customers, then only 50% of them are going to get it. So they're going to fight for it with a higher price. They're going to bid higher. The same is true with Bitcoin. When Bitcoin has a static or increasing demand, the community has had increasing participation, and the money hitting the market, due to the halvening, has decreased. So they're going to pay more. I mean, that's supply. I don't know how you could say that's not significant. Of course, it's significant.
Well, he would argue that at this point, the difference in the amount of Bitcoin being produced is so small that that each halvening is like less and less relevant. But let's say you even grant that. Let's say you do, which there's a strong reason. People would argue that we shouldn't grant that, but let's say you do grant it for a moment. I would even argue that what truly matters is the sentiment. Like what matters is that once we pass this threshold, this inflection point, given how we've acted historically, people seem to like all agree. If we all agree together that this catalyst marks a difference in sentiment where we could feel more comfortable deploying capital and we'll have macro higher highs and higher lows, that's significant. Like market sentiment is not irrelevant.
I don't know. I mean, it may in the future. Again, there will come a point where it breaks, but it hasn't. So how's it not significant? We bottomed a year after the top, and we top a year or 15 months after that. I don't know what he's talking about. So, like he's saying that's what's happening. I mean, it might break, but when it breaks, if you're predicting it's going to break, you're going to say it's going to break, which means it's relevant. I mean,
yeah, which is my thing, which is like if it is indeed going to be irrelevant, I don't think we've seen evidence of that yet based off a chart. But to be fair to him, because like whenever I disagree with someone, I want to do my best to in good faith present their side of the argument. He would argue that another reason why it's irrelevant is essentially because crypto, in his opinion, because I asked him to clarify this, is an efficient market. And for those of you who don't know the difference between like an efficient and deficient market, an efficient market is essentially when everyone has the same news all at once. Like in the stock market, everyone gets the quarterly earnings report release all at once. Everyone hears when an interest rate hike or decrease happens all at once. Everyone hears the news of when quantitative easing or tightening happens all at once. And so these things kind of get priced in. But in my opinion, I would argue, and again, Furu, I want to get your take on this, is that we actually haven't seen evidence. I don't see evidence of an efficient market anywhere. I mean, like a parabolic market where we get like a parabolic pump and dump, that's not an efficient market. We can't even agree with each other as to what is and isn't a consensus mechanism with longevity. Everyone disagrees with each other. Proof of work, proof of stake, different forms of proof of work. Like that plays off the fact that like Michael Saylor and big money, smart money, they're not acting based off the Bitcoin halving. It's like the only people who are like thinking about this is a handful of crypto YouTubers, and even the people who do think about this, half of them don't even end up acting on this. So like my whole thing is I don't see evidence of this being an efficient market. If this was an efficient market where like everyone understood this equally and behaved off it, then I can understand a macro event being priced in. But I don't see that evidence of market efficiency. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's definitely not efficient. It's definitely not an efficient market. If that, I mean, I'm not an expert on this sort of topic, like efficient markets. I did take economics a while ago, micro, but
but it just means everyone has the same
yeah,
knowledge.
nobody even, a lot of people, just nobody really true. That's why Richard Hart is so significant in Hex, is that like if everybody believed what Richard Hart believed, then it would be an efficient market, meaning a lot of people are still caught up in the idea that like the technology is the most important thing, or like when it's really the community, you know, like he's talked about those things like Hart's law. It's just, this is a very like fast-paced, quickly evolving system. There's like decentralized exchanges. Nobody even knows how they work and stuff like that. I mean, the metrics that are measured, the metrics that are measured to determine good and bad cryptos are very far. Like everybody has completely different. There's just like no data. I mean, it seems like Richard Hart has been like the most on point, and eventually everybody will go by his sort of metrics. Like, for example, the community being most important, you know, and things like that. Like, that's like eventually when people sort of go to that realization, it'll be more efficient. But you know, you don't have a textbook telling you how to invest in crypto. This is like,
Exactly right.
There's no earnings. there's no balance sheet. You know, study the balance sheet of the Bitcoin. It's very opaque, and there's freaking memes. Like, who would have thought like coins that are jokes, you know, or like, so yeah, does a joke coin tell you anything about efficient markets in crypto? I think that's like quite the opposite. And like, which joke will catch which meme will catch of the 500 meme coins that are out there? It's like it's nobody knows, and there's no way of measuring. So I mean,
that's a really good point. I mean, Pepe's at like an $800 million market cap. Meanwhile, something that I personally like Time, the Internet Money wallet, it's at a $3 million market cap. It should be the inverse. Something with utilities, but something with the meme. But like, so like the point.
There's an Elon Musk tweet. Is that efficient? Is that efficient? Do we know when he's going to tweet about
pumping the market?
What crypto? Like,
no one agrees with each other as to how to evaluate these things.
Nobody agrees with each other, but there's one thing that has been very solid, and that is the Bitcoin halving. So to just throw it out with the bathwater, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater like it doesn't mean anything anymore, is, I think, retarded.